The hammer came down at $620,000, and the entire room went quiet in the specific way. Rooms go quiet when something unexpected has just happened, and nobody is sure yet whether to be impressed or offended. Every eye in the Caldwell Motorworks auction house turned toward the back corner, toward the man in the faded canvas jacket, the single father they had been quietly laughing at for the better part of 2 hours. Victor Langston's face drained of color at the front of the room. The auctioneer's hand hesitated over the block, and Eli Danforth, sitting in row J with his daughter's hand folded inside his, did not blink. He did not smile. He did not look around to see who was watching. He just waited. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Stay with me through this whole story. Because what happened inside Caldwell Motorworks that Thursday night wasn't just about a car or a bid or a man humiliating someone who thought he had nothing. It was about what people reveal about themselves when they believe they're looking down. Eli Danforth loaded his daughter Nora into his truck at 4:15 on a cold October afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. Nora was 8 years old, small for her age, with her mother's brown eyes, and the habit of carrying a stuffed elephant named Captain everywhere she went. Captain had one missing tusk. Eli had been meaning to fix it for months. The drive to the auction house took 40 minutes through the kind of Thursday evening traffic that Columbus does in October, sluggish and gray, the sky the color of old concrete. Eli drove without the radio. Nora sat in the passenger seat with Captain on her lap, watching the highway lights come on one by one. "Are you nervous?" she asked at some point past the third interchange. "No," Eli said. She looked at him the way children look at adults when they know the answer is incomplete. She didn't push it. Eli had showered and put on the best shirt he owned, a flannel in dark blue that was clean and pressed but still plainly what it was. His hands were scrubbed, but the knuckles still carried the faint gray of a man who works with engines for a living. His boots were steel-toed, not because he'd forgotten to wear something else. Because he didn't own something else. He was a mechanic. He ran a small shop off Merchant Avenue called Danforth's Auto, 1 bay, 2 lifts, a waiting area with 3 plastic chairs, and a coffee machine that worked 60% of the time. He employed himself and, on Saturdays, a teenager named Darnell who was learning and showed promise. That was the whole of it. What nobody in the auction house knew, what nobody had any reason to know, was that Eli Danforth had been living on the edge of something for 6 years. Not the edge of poverty, though there had been stretches close to it. The edge of a promise he had made to himself in a hospital waiting room on a Tuesday morning in March, while a cardiologist explained to him in careful language that his father had not survived the surgery. His father's name was Roy Danforth. Roy had owned a 1968 Shelby GT350 in competition orange. He had driven it every weekend from the time Eli was 7 years old until the transmission failed when Eli was 19, and the money wasn't there to fix it right. So Roy sold it to a collector in Pittsburgh for $14,000 and never talked about it without pausing first. Eli had been 11 years old the first time Roy let him sit in the driver's seat with the engine running. He still remembered the vibration through the seat, the specific sound of the engine, not loud the way people always described muscle cars, but deep, like something alive. Roy had said, "You feel that? That's not noise, that's conversation. If you learn to listen, the car will always tell you what it needs." 6 years ago, Eli had seen a listing on a collector's registry. A competition orange 1968 Shelby GT350, serial number documented, history traced through 4 previous owners. Asking estimate at Caldwell Motorworks, $450,000 to $550,000. He had not slept for 3 days after seeing that listing. He had been saving since. The glass doors of Caldwell Motorworks opened at exactly 6:30, and Eli walked through them with Nora's hand in his left hand and his invitation in his right. He felt the room's attention shift the moment they crossed the threshold. Not loudly, not with anyone pointing. Just the small hydraulic shift of a crowd adjusting to something that didn't fit. Caldwell Motorworks occupied a converted warehouse in the Short North District. Someone had spent real money on the transformation. The floors were polished concrete stained a deep charcoal. Track lighting hung from exposed industrial beams, angled to illuminate the vehicles on the floor below, built like exhibits in a museum of very expensive ambitions. The air smelled of money and leather conditioner. The people matched the room. Men in jackets that had been tailored to specific shoulders. Women in dresses that moved correctly under the lights. Champagne flutes everywhere, the stem held kind. Nora squeezed his hand. "It's very shiny," she said quietly. "It is," Eli agreed. A young man in a black vest and a Caldwell Motorworks lanyard intercepted them near the registration desk. He looked at Eli the way a hotel concierge looks at a guest who has arrived without a reservation. That particular expression that is simultaneously professional and uncertain. "Good evening. Can I help you find something?" "I'm registered for the auction," Eli said. He handed over the invitation. Printed on plain paper, creased once across the middle from being folded in his jacket pocket. The young man took it with 2 fingers and turned to his tablet. His expression went through a small private recalibration. "Mr. Danforth." He said the name as a statement, not a greeting. "That's right, your deposit cleared." Another recalibration. Smaller this time, but visible. "Welcome to Caldwell. The floor preview is open until 7:30. Can I offer up champagne? Do you have anything for kids?" Eli asked, nodding toward Nora. The young man blinked. "I'll check with catering." They moved past him into the main floor. Nora stayed close, her shoulder against Eli's hip, Captain held with both arms across her chest. Eli scanned the room once, the way he always scanned rooms, not nervously but methodically, the same way he scanned an engine bay. Looking for the thing he came for, he found it in the far corner under a light that was brighter than the others. Competition orange. Black racing stripes over the hood. The GT350 sat on a low platform like it was waiting for something, not for the auction, but for the specific person who would understand what it was. Eli walked toward it through the crowd. People stepped aside. Not politely, exactly. The way people step aside when they're moving around something they're not sure belongs. He heard fragments. "Who let the kid in?" A pause, a quiet laugh. "Maybe he's someone's driver." He kept walking. Up close, the car was extraordinary. The restoration was thorough in the way only someone obsessive could manage. The paint had the right depth. The chrome had been polished to a clarity that made the overhead lights multiply inside it. Someone had loved this car correctly. He found the small things immediately. The replacement fuel filler door, newer than the rest, a fraction off in finish. The windshield seal showing one corner where the original rubber had been preserved rather than replaced. These were the marks of a restorer who understood what mattered. And on the driver's side rocker panel, so faint now as to be nearly invisible, a small gouge the shape of a quarter moon, from the time a 12-year-old Eli had caught a bicycle pedal against it in the driveway, and spent a week certain his father would notice. Roy had noticed. He hadn't said anything about the gouge. He'd taken Eli to get ice cream. Eli stood looking at the mark for a long moment. Then he crouched down and ran one finger across it. "Excuse me." The voice came from his left, clipped and carrying the particular confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. Victor Langston was maybe 55, with silver hair combed back with intention and a charcoal suit that fit the way money fits. The watch on his wrist was the kind that doesn't show a digital face because it doesn't have to prove anything. He was holding a phone up, photographing the front quarter panel, and Eli was apparently in his frame. Eli moved slightly to the right. "Magnificent machine," Langston said, the remark addressed partly to Eli and partly to the room. "Yes," Eli said. Langston lowered his phone and looked at Eli with the brief, complete assessment of a man who has sorted people into categories his whole life and has gotten very fast at it. His gaze moved from the jacket to the boots, and then to Nora, who was looking up at him with the frank curiosity she applied to everything. "Family outing?" Langston asked. The words were pleasant. The tone was something else. "Something like that," Eli said. "Well," Langston smiled. "Enjoy the preview." He moved away, already typing into his phone. Nora watched him go. "I don't like him," she said, at a volume that was mercifully not quite loud enough. "You don't know him," Eli said. "I know enough," she said. He looked at her for a moment. He didn't argue. They were standing near the GT350's rear when a woman appeared beside them, arriving quietly, the way observant people arrive in rooms. She was around 40, in a gray jacket over a simple dark shirt, with the kind of face that listens before it speaks. Her name tag read Caldwell Motorworks, Special Collections. Underneath, in smaller print, "Diana Wren, Consignment Director." She looked at the car first. Then you found the one, she said. It wasn't a question. I found it, Eli agreed. Most people walk straight to the Ferrari lot. This one usually gets 3 minutes from the preview crowd, maybe 4. Most people don't know what they're looking at, Eli said. He said it without judgment. He had known this about people in cars for a long time. Diana tilted her head slightly. Can I ask what you see in it? Eli was quiet for a moment. He looked at the rocker panel, at the quarter-moon gouge. My father's car, he said. Diana was still. When did your family sell it? 6 years ago. After he died, we needed the money. She looked at the gouge on the rocker panel. Then she looked back at Eli with an expression that had moved past professional into something more honest. You're here to bid, she said. That's why people come to auctions. She almost smiled. The estimate is $450 to $550. The reserve is set at $400. In this room with this crowd tonight, it could go higher. I know, Eli said. She studied him for a moment. Is your daughter okay in here? The auction runs long. She brought a book. Nora produced Captain from under her arm as evidence. Diana looked at Captain. It's a good elephant, she said seriously. Nora considered this. He's been through a lot, she said. Diana left them there. Eli watched her go and had the particular feeling of being seen accurately by someone who wasn't making anything of it. It was rarer than people thought. At 7:30, the floor lights dimmed and the auction began. The auctioneer was a man named Crawford Pruitt, maybe 65, with a voice built for exactly this purpose and the kind of authority that comes from doing one thing with complete commitment for 3 decades. The cars moved through in sequence. A 69 Camaro, a 72 Corvette, a restored Mustang Fastback from 1965. Nora fell asleep against Eli's shoulder during Lot 12. He shifted her carefully, making sure she stayed balanced, and picked up his bidding paddle with his free hand. Number 214. The man to Eli's right was in his late 30s, in a blazer and open collar, the kind of person who looked like someone's idea of a collector. He had been glancing at Eli since the auction started, not continuously, just occasional checks, the way you glance at something that doesn't add up. At Lot 14, Eli heard the man lean toward the woman beside him and say, very quietly, I think security missed someone. The woman looked over. She covered her laugh with her champagne glass. Eli's hand on the paddle did not tighten. He stayed still. He had been very still for most of his adult life in rooms that didn't think he belonged. And then Crawford Pruitt said, Lot 17, a 1968 Shelby GT350, in competition orange, numbers matching, documented provenance, full professional restoration. One of the most original examples of this model in private circulation. We'll open at $300,000. The room shifted. Eli felt it. 6 paddles went up immediately. $350, $400, $450. The bidding climbed with the casual confidence of people for whom these numbers were real but not frightening. Eli watched, paddle resting on his knee. Not yet. His father had taught him patience the way he taught everything, by doing it himself and letting Eli watch until he understood. You don't jump at the first opening. You wait. You listen to what's happening before you put yourself in it. At $500,000, 3 bidders dropped out. At $525, 1 more. Victor Langston was the remaining competitor, bidding from the 3rd row, with the measured, controlled confidence of a man who had done this before and expected to be the last one standing. He didn't look around. He looked at the car. $550. Pruitt's voice. $550 on the floor. Do I hear $575? Silence. Eli raised his paddle. The room noticed. Not all at once, not loudly. But the way rooms notice when something happens that disrupts a narrative they'd already settled on. $570 from the gentleman in row J, Pruitt said, and his voice didn't change, which was the professional thing, but something in the room had. Victor Langston turned in his seat. He found Eli in the back corner. His eyes moved from the canvas jacket to the sleeping child to the paddle, and then, briefly, to something private in his own expression that passed before Eli could name it. He raised his paddle, $600,000. Eli raised his, $625. The man in the blazer beside Eli said, out loud, not quietly, he's joking. His companion said nothing. She was watching Eli. Langston raised his paddle again, $650. Eli looked at the GT350 across the room, at the competition orange under the track lights, at everything that had brought him to this specific chair in this specific room after 6 years of 7-day weeks, and skipped vacations and Saturday shifts, and every dollar that could have gone somewhere else going. Instead, into an account he had labeled simply, Dad. He raised the paddle. 675. Langston stood up. He turned around completely, so the whole room could see both his face and Eli's at the same time. His expression was controlled, but only just. "Who are you?" he said. The question was too loud. It was meant to be. "A bidder," Eli said. "You can't." Langston stopped himself, recalibrated. "This is a significant purchase. People don't just walk in off the street." "I registered 3 weeks ago," Eli said. Deposit cleared on the 14th. A few heads turned. A few conversations paused. Langston looked at him for a moment longer. Then he raised his paddle. 700,000. This was past Eli's approved financing. He had known it might come to this. He had thought about it in the truck on the way here, with Nora asleep in the passenger seat and Columbus sliding by outside the window. He thought about his father sitting in the driver's seat of that car in a driveway in Bexley. 20 years ago, a cup of gas station coffee in one hand and the other resting on the wheel. Not going anywhere, just present in a thing he loved. Eli raised the paddle. 725. The room went very quiet. Pruitt's voice, 725. "Do I hear 750? Langston looked at Eli, not with the quick assessment from earlier, with something more careful. He had the expression of a man recalculating a situation he thought he understood. He raised his paddle slowly. 750. Eli looked at the car. He looked at Nora asleep against his shoulder. He thought about 6 years every Saturday the account labeled Dad. He set down the paddle. Langston exhaled. A small sound, barely audible, but Diana Wren heard it from where she stood along the left wall, and she remembered it later. 750, going once, and then a voice came from beside Eli. Diana Wren, who had moved quietly from her post along the wall and was now standing at the end of row J. She said, "Mr. Danforth, there's something you should know about the vehicle before the block falls." Pruitt paused. The room held. Diana spoke clearly, the way she spoke when she was saying something that mattered. "The consignment director's notes on this vehicle include documentation from a previous owner that was not included in the main auction listing. A Gerald Pruitt of Pittsburgh. Mr. Pruitt purchased this car from the Danforth estate in 2018 and made the decision not to alter the rocker panel gouge on the driver's side because he considered it a provenance detail. His restoration notes, which I located this afternoon in the consignment file, include the original sales receipt from when Roy Danforth first purchased the vehicle in 1979 from a dealership in Columbus. The receipt is in the file. Mr. Danforth's name is on it." The room was very still. Diana continued. "Complete provenance from original purchase to present owner increases the appraised value of this vehicle by a margin our senior appraiser puts at between $80,000 and $120,000 above current hammer price. I should have included this in the lot description. I apologize for the omission." She looked at Eli then, briefly, and looked away. Pruitt cleared his throat. "Given the new provenance information, we'll reset the bidding at current position. 750 on the floor. Do we have 775? Victor Langston was still standing. He turned to look at Eli again. Then he looked at Diana. His jaw moved slightly. He raised his paddle, 800,000. The man beside Eli said something under his breath. Eli looked at the car one more time. He thought about Roy Danforth's hands on the wheel, about a quarter moon gouged the size of a bicycle pedal, about a Tuesday morning in March and a hospital waiting room and a cardiologist's careful language. He raised the paddle, 825. Langston's paddle arm moved halfway up and stopped. He held it there for a moment halfway suspended. Then he lowered it. He did not raise it again. 825. Going once, going twice. The hammer came down. Nora woke up at the sound of it. She looked at her father. His face was not the face she saw when he was pretending to be fine. It was something else. She had seen it only a few times in her life. Once when he talked about her mother, once when she had graduated from 2nd grade, and he had stood in the school gymnasium holding flowers that were slightly wilted because he bought them from a gas station an hour early and waited. "Did we get it?" she asked. He couldn't answer for a moment. "Yeah, baby," he said finally. "We got it." She threw her arms around his neck. Captain was squished between them. He held her longer than the moment required. The settlement desk was a table near the stage. Eli waited for the room to thin before he joined the line. People stared as he passed. A few conversations happened openly, not quietly anymore. He heard, 7 years in collections and I've never seen anything like that. He heard, who is he? He heard from the man in the blazer, delivered to no one in particular. Must be borrowed money, won't clear. Eli kept walking. Victor Langston was ahead of him at the desk. When Eli approached, Langston turned. His expression was different from what it had been an hour ago. Not softer exactly. Something that had less structure to it, like a form that had lost part of its scaffolding. Congratulations, Langston said. Thank you, Eli said. A pause. Langston looked at Nora, who was watching him with her frank, unfiltered attention. He looked back at Eli. That car, he said. You knew it. I grew up with it, Eli said. Langston was quiet for a moment. He had a daughter of his own, 23 now, living in Portland. He hadn't talked to her in 8 months. She'd stopped calling first. He didn't think about that often, or rather he thought about it in the way you think about something you've trained yourself not to examine too directly. He turned back to the desk. He completed his transaction, a restored Ferrari from Lot 22, 600,000, a good car, a correct investment, and left without looking back at Eli. But at the door, he stopped. He stood there for several seconds, longer than it takes to simply exit through a door. Diana Wren appeared at Eli's shoulder while he was reviewing the settlement paperwork. She set a manila folder on the table beside the forms. The original purchase receipt, she said, and Gerald Pruitt's restoration notes. They belong with the car. Eli looked at the folder. He looked at Diana. You didn't have to do that, he said. The information was in the file, she said. It should have been in the listing. That's the job. She paused. My grandfather had a car he had to sell, she said. He talked about it until the day he died. She walked away before he could respond. Eli read his father's name on the receipt from 1979. Roy D. Danforth, 4417 Meridian Avenue, Columbus, Och. The signature was in blue ink, slightly rushed, the handwriting of a man who was too excited to be careful. He closed the folder. Outside, the parking lot was half empty. Columbus's October night cold and clear. He buckled Nora into the truck's back seat. She fell asleep again almost immediately, captain tucked against her chin, the single remaining tusk pointing upward. Eli sat in the driver's seat for a moment without starting the engine. The GT350 wouldn't come home with him tonight. He had arranged transport for tomorrow, a climate-controlled trailer from a restoration specialist he trusted. A man named Terrence Hodge, who operated out of Gahanna and who had the specific understanding that some cars required more than professional care. But tomorrow the car would be in his garage, his father's car in his garage, in the bay he had kept empty for 6 years, not out of superstition, out of something harder to name. He started the truck. He drove home through the night streets of Columbus with his daughter asleep behind him, and for the first time in 6 years he let himself think about what came next. Not the debt or the payments or the impossible math of it, but what came after that. Showing Nora what a 302 cubic inch V8 sounds like when it's running right. Teaching her to read oil pressure. Telling her about a man she never got to meet, who had 2 rules about engines. Listen to what they're telling you, and don't give up on something that still has life in it. He looked at his phone before pulling out of the lot, a name he hadn't called in almost a year. His sister Ruth, in Cincinnati, who had been at the hospital that Tuesday morning in March, and who had held his hand in the waiting room without saying anything, which was the right thing, and who had cried more than he had at the graveside, which had somehow made it easier for him to hold his. He put the phone back in his pocket. He drove home. What happened to Victor Langston in the weeks that followed was not a dramatic fall. It was the slower, more accurate kind. The kind that comes when a pattern of behavior finally catches up with a man who has spent decades believing patterns only applied to other people. 3 days after the auction, a story appeared in an automotive collector's publication, a small but respected trade journal, about the Caldwell Motorworks session. The story focused on an unusual bidding sequence involving a competition orange GT350 and the moment of provenance disclosure mid-auction. The article was factual and attributed to 2 sources who had been in the room. Victor Langston's name appeared once. His comment during the bidding, "Who are you?" was quoted directly. It was the smallest detail in the piece. It generated the largest response. Langston sat in his office in the Easton Town Center building, where his automotive acquisition firm occupied the 7th floor, and read the comments attached to the article online for approximately 20 minutes. Then he closed the tab. His business partner, a man named Ronald Scaife, called him that afternoon. Ronald had a daughter Nora's age. Ronald's, Victor. We need to talk about the optics here. Langston said, it's one article. Ronald said, it's not one article anymore. The institutional investors, who provided a significant portion of Langston's acquisition fund, had a quarterly review meeting 2 weeks later. 2 of them cited the incident unprompted. Not because they had read the article, but because their adult children had shown it to them. One of them said, with the careful language of a man delivering a decision already made, Victor, we've been doing this together for 9 years, and I want to be direct with you. The way a man behaves in a room when he thinks it doesn't cost him anything, that's the most honest information you have about him. We're going to pause the Q4 capital commitment while we review. The review took 47 days. When it concluded, the allocation was reduced by 40%. Victor Langston sat in his office the evening. The letter arrived and looked at the window for a long time without moving. The Columbus skyline was lit up the way it gets in November, the cold air making the lights sharp. He thought about that moment in the parking lot when he had stopped at the door and stood there for several seconds, too long. He had known, standing there, that he had done something. Not the bidding, not the money, the tone, the public question. Who are you? Delivered to a man holding a sleeping child in a room where everyone was listening. He had known it the moment he said it. He had kept walking anyway. He picked up his phone. He looked at his daughter's name in his contacts. His thumb hovered. He called her. She answered on the 4th ring, surprised, the way you sound when a call arrives from a direction you stopped expecting. He said her name. She said his. There was a silence between them that had the texture of something old and accumulated. He did not explain the article or the investors or the 47 days. He said, I've been thinking about something I did that I keep doing. I wanted to call. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said, that was all. For now. But she stayed on the line, and he did too. The GT350 came home on a Saturday morning in a climate-controlled trailer driven by Terrence Hodge, who was meticulous and quiet and handled the offloading with the professional care of someone who understood that what he was delivering was not just a vehicle. Eli and Nora watched it come off the ramp. Nora had not seen the car in the daylight before, only under the auction house track lights. Now, in the ordinary October sun of a Saturday morning in Columbus, it was both more ordinary and more itself. The orange was brighter, the lines were cleaner. The small imperfections of the restoration were visible in a way that made it more real rather than less. Terrence shook Eli's hand and drove away. Eli pulled the car slowly into the garage. Into the bay he had kept empty for 6 years. He cut the engine and sat for a moment in the quiet. Nora came in from the side door. She walked up to the passenger side and stood there with Captain under one arm, looking at the car the way she looked at things she was deciding about. "Can I get in?" she asked. "Come on," Eli said. She climbed into the passenger seat. It was big for her. She held Captain on her lap and looked at the dash, the gauges, the steering wheel, with its small patina of age at the grip points. "It smells like your shop," she said. "But older." Older, Eli agreed. She was quiet for a moment. Captain's single remaining tusk pointed up at the headliner. "Is this what Grandpa smelled like?" she asked. Eli's hand rested on the shift knob. He didn't answer immediately. A little? He said, "Yeah." She nodded, satisfied with this. She leaned back in the big seat and looked at the ceiling of the garage. "Can you teach me?" she said. "Teach you what?" "What he taught you." Eli looked at his daughter in his father's passenger seat in the garage that smelled of motor oil and time. He thought about Roy Danforth sitting in the driveway with a gas station coffee, engine running, not going anywhere. "Start simple," Eli said. "Listen to what the car is telling you." Nora put her hand on the dashboard. "It's not saying anything right now," she said. "That's because the engine's off," Eli said. She considered this. "Okay," she said. "Turn it on." He turned the key. The 302 V8 came to life in the closed garage, with the voice that Eli had last heard through a hospital window in March, 6 years ago. Standing in a parking lot. not knowing yet what the doctors were about to tell him, just standing in the cold with the truck running because he hadn't been able to make himself turn it off. The sound of the engine filled the bay. Nora's eyes went wide. She took her hand off the dashboard and placed it flat on the seat beside her. She could feel it through the leather. "Oh," she said, "just that. Oh." Outside the garage door, a neighbor's dog barked once at the sound and then went quiet. Somewhere down Merchant Avenue, a car passed in the ordinary Columbus Saturday morning. Life continued in the direction it always continues, without ceremony, without announcement. Inside the garage, a father and daughter sat in a car that had come home. Eli looked at his phone on the workbench, a text from Diana Wren sent that morning. The single sentence, "Hope it sounds the way you remembered." He reached over and fixed Captain's tusk with a small piece of electrical tape from the toolbox. It wasn't the right fix. He'd do it properly later, with a needle and thread, the way things should be done. For now it held. He put the phone back on the bench and listened to the engine with his daughter. Sometimes the people the world overlooks are the ones carrying the most. Not because they've hidden it, but because they've never had to announce it to anyone. They just keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep saving the thing that matters, even when every sensible voice in the room is telling them to let it go. Eli Danforth walked into a room full of people who had already decided who he was. He didn't argue with them, he didn't perform, he didn't explain. He sat in row J with a sleeping child on his shoulder and a paddle in his hand, and he waited for the right moment. That's not stubbornness. That's the specific kind of faith that comes from knowing your own worth without needing anyone in the room to confirm it. Roy Danforth taught his son 2 things about engines. Listen to what they're telling you, and don't give up on something that still has life in it. His son listened. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated, only to discover who they really were? Share your story below. And if you want more stories like this, stories about ordinary people with extraordinary hidden depths, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.